Hello, you guys. Welcome to this video where we'll be discussing and going through quite a few ideas for TOK Essay Title number 1. We'll be going through these ideas in this digital classroom so you guys can gain a better understanding of this title. The title goes, Is subjectivity overly celebrated in the arts but unfairly condemned in history? So, for this title, we have to acknowledge that both arts and history, they are very subjective in nature, and subjectivity is present. It's just a question of whether it's good or it's bad, and to what extent. So the key terms in this title, first one is subjectivity, which is the influence by internal factors or from within. Secondly, is it overly celebrated, which is also excessively admired, or treated as more significant than it actually deserves to be. Third key term, is it unfairly condemned or declared to be unfit for use? So when we go to subjectivity in the arts, it's seen as a really good thing because it shows the uniqueness of the artist and it contributes to the personal connection in artistic pieces, and it actually makes these artistic pieces more valuable and relatable. And it's also good in the arts because it creates a diverse range of meanings and interpretations for the audience. So is it overly celebrated? Yeah, it can be when there is an extensive reception that glorifies mediocre art. So here you'd have to talk about mediocre art properly. What is it? So you'd have to go into methods and tools. And you would be saying that the way in which art is produced sometimes doesn't correspond with the way in which it's received. So you'd have to look up overrated artwork, look up quite a few examples of them, pick one that you really like. Over here we have Campbell soup cans. So basically Andy Warhol painted the cans and it got an extensive reception. It's widely seen as an overrated work. Most of the time you will probably come across it when you're researching about this. So secondly, you can say that art can be overly celebrated because it can increase by its scope, like its market value, in kind of an unfair manner. So here we're looking at Banksy's painting only because Banksy is very popular in IB, and how his painting really jumped in its scale or its market value in 2021 after a bit of subjectivity in 2018 when he performed or he created a performance art, let's say, in relation to this artwork. So you're saying that art can be overly celebrated in this manner, and yeah, you'd also have to explain why you think that is. So this claim is slightly more harder to justify than the first one, so it's really up to you which one you'd want to choose. Now, secondly, when you're going to your counterclaim, you'd be saying art is not overly celebrated. So you can say that art isn't because actually it can easily be overlooked due to audience interpretation or historical contexts. So here we have two artists. Make sure to find your own. So on the right-hand side, we have Hyman Bloom. He painted very subjectively about themes like life and death, mostly death, and his paintings were very uncomfortable to look at. So he had a very niche audience, and as a result of that, due to his subjectivity, he is extremely underrated, even now. No one really knows about him. Secondly, we have Margaret McIntosh, who is one of those female painters who have been underrated throughout history. And you can look up examples like this, and you can use them to say that art can easily be overlooked, and thus is not overly celebrated. Now, secondly, you can also say that art can be treated very harshly and thus is not overly celebrated. It's very recently in 2022, I don't know if you guys remember, but these oil protesters threw tomato soup at Van Gogh's painting. And they basically thought, yeah, art is overly celebrated when compared to climate change, so I'm going to vandalize art. So Sometimes art is not respected at all, and thus it's not overly celebrated, would be your argument. So look up other examples of paintings being vandalized. I think Mona Lisa is one example of a painting that has gotten vandalized excessively, but look up other examples as well and pick one that you think is good for you. So when we go to history, subjectivity in history is a funny thing because it's not supposed to excessively be there. And if subjectivity in history does exist, it needs a large amount of supporting evidence to be valid. So here we are going to a historian's objectivity, and historian subjectivity is needed to make accurate historical deductions. It's very similar to a referee in a football match. So a referee in a football match is expected to be very impartial and objective and to make interpretations based on the available evidence. However, a referee's decisions can be influenced by their own biases or external factors. So that's very similar to a historian's subjectivity, where a historian's interpretations can also be influenced by their own biases or external factors. So is it unfairly condemned, though, the subjectivity in history? When you're talking about that claim or counterclaim, you can talk about Voltaire, who was a French Enlightenment writer, and he wrote the essay on customs. And he was saying that subjectivity can offer a broadened perspective. Like, consider multiple perspectives and don't write objectively. Because when we're looking at big history, which is a very objective view on history, there is a lack of traditional accounts, or there is a lack of detail that is needed for the reader or the knower to make an interpretation of their own. So Tolstoy also agreed with this, and he advocated for an unbiased view because according to Tolstoy, history is based on a lot of experiences or the collective experiences of the people who have lived. So we can look at literary works that provide a subjective perspective of history and speak of how it provides insight in some manner. You can also look up historians who have sort of supported this point of view. Now, literary works, you guys can refer to maybe War and Peace by Tolstoy, Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie, A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Adichie. And it's up to you guys, like, you can pick any that you really like, and you can base your argument on that, or you can base your argument on a historian, which you should do as well. The example itself can vary, but you need a historian. Now, when you're going to say that subjectivity can be fairly condemned, that's your counterclaim, and you're saying that it's very necessary to condemn subjectivity sometimes, right? Because it has the ability to obscure or distort facts and events, and it creates a misunderstanding of events sometimes if there is such a distortion. So here you're looking up examples of historical bias, regardless of whether it's conscious or due to the context, etc. Biases have been a part of history as a discipline since the very beginning. So one way in which you can find easy examples is if you're looking at colonialized cultures or cultures who somehow lost their voice. So examples of this would be Native American cultures, African cultures, Asian cultures, and also indigenous Australian cultures. These are just examples. You can look into other cultures as well and talk about how their historical portrayal have been extremely negative or not nuanced at all, and how they are sometimes seen as primitive or inferior or uncivilized, etc. So, yeah, when we address historical bias and its possible consequences over generations, we are basically saying that this sort of subjectivity is very fairly condemned in the field of history. So yeah, this topic is one of the most interesting topics in the May 2024 essay titles. And it may look easy, but yeah, there's a fair bit of justification to do once you start your arguments. So make sure your arguments are good. and make sure you go through a couple drafts as usual, maybe 3 drafts, and make sure to get feedback. If you guys are not getting enough feedback from your school, you can get on the platform and you can speak to me, of course, or you can speak to one of our other TOK experts and see if your understanding of this task is crystal clear. So yeah, good luck on your essay and take care. Bye.